Welcome to another exciting and chock full of wisdom episode of Penned the Writer's Utopia. I'm Lynn Tate, and I am so excited to be here with you guys tonight. Listen, we have an amazing guest that's coming on who is gifted with written expression, but I so love the unique version of how she is being used to share her gifting. And I can't wait to get in the conversation with her tonight. So, without further ado, I want to welcome my new friend and colleague from Spark and Buzz, Miss Courtney Malengo. Hi, Courtney. How are you?
Hi, Lynn. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
I'm so grateful that I was able to get you in this season because we have some amazing conversations and I just love what you do, right? So, this show is all about the gift of writing. And specifically this season, we've been focusing on how that gifting is being used in the marketplace for God's purpose, right? And so, what people don't know is Spark and Buzz is what I like to call a good old fashioned, to me, I'm gonna say it like this: a good old fashioned public relations office. You do everything from branding to marketing to so much more of just getting your business out into the marketplace, getting the, what's the word I'm going to use? Getting the buzz. What's your spark and buzz? Getting that buzz going, right? And so I love that because that is a different take. And what I always try to display on the Writer's Utopia is that here writing can be, the gift of writing can be used in so many different arenas and ways. It's not just writing books, it's not just
Right.
writing screenplays and poetry. Literally, there are ways that writing is being used in so many different areas and industries. And I know the word I was looking for now: copywriting. Right? Copywriting is big because that is a part of marketing and branding. So I'm excited to have you tonight. I hope our viewers are excited for this conversation. But before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah. Well, like you already mentioned, so I'm the founder of Spark and Buzz Communications, which is a strategic communications consultancy helping brands tell their story to inspire audiences and galvanize growth. And we do that through a variety of integrated branding, marketing, and public relations solutions. And like you mentioned, there's kind of never a dull moment. There's always opportunities for how I think writing shows up. So, my background, I started my career as a journalist. I knew I always wanted to be a writer. When I was a kid, I devoured Nancy Drew books, any book I could get my hands on. But I think, I fancied myself as like part Nancy Drew, like a detective type. And, I can remember being as early as like fourth grade. I remember my fourth grade teacher, Mr. Turner. We had a creative writing segment in class, and I would just get totally lost in whatever world or universe, right, I was creating, with my pen.
Yeah.
That I realized like I had a love for writing. And so I always followed that. It's had lots of different expressions, over the years, different directions, but kind of the core of who I am is a writer. And I do believe that if you can write well, you can do anything, because the truth is, especially in the workplace, so many people do not know how to write. And I guess today people probably think they don't know how to, or well, let me rephrase that. They don't need to because, they can just have AI write it for them. But AI is not always correct. And, we're still teaching
Yeah.
AI. So there is a bit of an art and a science, I think, to writing. And so that's a little like high level of kind of, my journey. But after I evolved from journalism, I got more into branding and marketing, corporate comms, and then PR. And ultimately, I worked across a lot of different industries before Spark and Buzz. So I was in nonprofits, faith-based organizations, senior living, healthcare, real estate. So I kind of did a lot of different industries. And again, that took on the writing and the marketing and kind of what that looked like always took on a different flavor, depending on where I was.
Yeah. So I love that you fell in love with writing in your creative writing class. Like, really, because you're right. Like, you get to create your own world with your characters and their own set of circumstances to get through. And just that process alone is so much fun. Um,
Yeah.
but I even love that you started out wanting to be a journalist, because at one time that's what I thought I wanted to do. But life took a different turn, and that's okay. But the investigativeness in it, I can see how that journalism background can play into marketing, because literally you're investigating what are the trends, what are people wanting to see. Like, it goes hand in hand, and it plays very well in the sandbox together. So I love
Yeah.
that.
I like to say that it makes me innately curious because I think I was always curious individual anyway, but because I was a journalist for a while, I was always searching for the story, right? Like, what's the angle on this? What's the story? How are we going to share that? How are we going to tell that? And so I tend to ask a lot of questions. I'll ask why frequently. It has annoyed some of my former bosses, but I feel like if I can truly understand what you're trying to do, then I can better help you, right? I can better articulate that and communicate that. And so the journalism piece forced me to be an expert in a lot of areas like I would never be an expert in, right? I had to take this like deep dive crash course on like stormwater management for a homeowners association or like whatever it was. I had to learn some of these really complex and complicated terms and processes and then translate that into layperson language so that an average person could understand what's the
Yeah.
issue, what are we talking about, what does that look like. So I think that background, and frankly, always being like maybe a little skeptical, you know, has helped me in my career and in everything else I decided to do.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that, because in essence, that's what you're doing now. You're being skeptical in the branding, and you have to ask the right questions. Really, like, if you don't investigate or look into the product or the person or the brand that you're working with, you're literally, how I see that playing out is you're asking those burning questions that those who are your market is going to be looking and asking. So totally,
Yeah.
I love this whole path for you.
Well,
I
and I
do.
think like there's different, questions too for I think what happens a lot of times, right? It depends on the life cycle of the company, but like if you're a startup or if you're talking to a CEO of a company that's been around for 50 years or 100 years, there are preconceived notions about what their product is, what their service is, how that should be positioned in the marketplace. And a lot of times what individuals internally think is different than really what the market wants or what the market might be thinking. And so sometimes it's kind of like I feel like I can be a little bit of a naysayer in the sense that I'm always trying to get people to understand that sort of just because you think that, right, doesn't mean that everybody else around you thinks the same thing or that your customer or your client base is going to receive it that way. And so I think it's nobody's perfect, but it's really looking at those things and examining all those kinds of questions to say, yeah, is that true? It's sort of like you believe that to be true, but like, how do we know that that's true? And like, let's
Yeah.
actually kind of dive into some data and focus groups and get some feedback because the higher up the corporate ladder you climb, the easier it is to be removed from the day to day of your employees and your clients and your customers. And so it's you inherently have more knowledge and information about the company than anybody else does, but you forget that you have all that. And so because of that, you make different assumptions because in your world you have access to more of this info than other people do. So you don't think about it the same way. And it's really about, I think, helping re-educate people. So helping them see their brand through the lens of the customer, through the lens of the client, through the lens of the naysayers or the negative reviews online, so that they can figure out, okay, well, if we know what the problem is, right, we can tweak that, we can message to that, we can address that. But if you just pretend like it doesn't exist, you're not really getting anywhere.
That right there is so good, Courtney. So good, right? Because you're right. When you have the vision and you're the visionary, you're seeing it from a perspective that's different. Normally, it starts out as your baby, right? This thing that you're growing, that you're nurturing, that you're bringing up. You have a totally different attachment to it than what your audience, your client, and then you brought up the great one, even your employees have a different point of view because it's
Yes.
not their baby. They're coming in and they're trying to see this vision that you have been seeing and growing. And you just look at it like it's the perfect little thing in the world. And they're like, no, like
Yeah.
you need some help. Um,
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong, that perspective is really important. And like speaking as a founder, I can appreciate that. It's like, yeah, it is your baby. It's inherently special. But I think you also have to like realize that again, it's not that you're wrong. It's not actually that either of you are wrong. It's that you have a different perspective and you're
yeah,
communicating that in a different way. And so in order to understand each other, and understand like, so part of the visionary founder and like what makes them tick and work, or or if it's the CEO again who's like taken over, like there is a special skill set and role they all inherently have. And sometimes that's going to rub heads and like bump against others that are different, but like we each need each other. So it's like
yeah,
we can use those skills to further refine the message, further refine the
exactly.
positioning, but also help bring some understanding, and then help from like kind of a culture internal standpoint of like, what does collaboration actually look like? How are we working with one another? How are we supporting each other? How are
Yeah,
we, the messaging that we're using externally, is that just for marketing fodder, or is it true? And if it's true, are we talking about the important values of our company? Like what's our North Star? What's our why? Like what, all those things, those should translate internally too. It should not just be an external endeavor. So I see them all as like, comically problematic, right? But they're not things that you can't overcome if you're, as long as you're willing to have that conversation and understanding.
yes. No, I totally agree. And I like I said, it's a team. Like you said, it's a team that comes together to help you to see all sides of it. Because again, when you're looking at this, I'm gonna give you the perfect analogy. It's like I'm gonna go back to this parenting thing again, right? Because we're mothers, so you get it. Um, but you're parenting your kid and your child comes out, you have this baby and you're growing them from infancy, but as that child grows the needs are different. But sometimes as parents, because we just want to love and protect and keep our children in this little bubble, right? We're not realizing that our child, or we see it, but we're not always adjusting our behavior to give it more independency and different treatment as it grows up. We're always like, well, that's my baby. How many parents say that? That's my baby. They're always going to be my baby. No, but you can't treat your child as an adult the way you did when they were an infant. Like now you're handicapping them. You're not giving them what they need at this new phase. And so
That's
that
right.
is what happens with your brand and your business.
Yeah,
In your infancy, you will market and you will do things differently than you would do with them once it is a more mature business. Now
that's
the
right.
needs are different. Now you do have customers that come in and are looking for you to give a certain messaging, and you want your messaging to align with the age and the maturity, that's what I want to say, of your brand and your business. So it does change over time, and you
Yeah.
can lose sight of that as the founder, the owner, the person that's pushing. If you are not in the day-to-day trenches, then you do need to reach back and connect with those that are in the trenches to learn what has changed. because you're still looking at it, oh, my baby from infancy.
Right, right. No, I think that's a
Yeah.
great, I think that's a great, analogy for it because a lot of times I think especially leaders and, and companies don't necessarily know when and how to like evolve their message. So it's not that I mean, like, unless you have acquired a radically different company or you are doing something totally different than, what you were doing when you started, the message is not inherently radically different. It's really more about how you're nuancing it and presenting it. And
Yeah.
because, especially culturally speaking, like times change, right? So, messaging that worked in the 50s, right, isn't necessarily going to work today. It's the same kind of thing. There's still, might be the same theme or the same idea, but how that gets presented will change. And so I try and explain it that way to people, or even looking at it like, you are writing a story, right? Everybody has
Yeah.
their own story and there's different chapters. And that doesn't mean that you don't change things along the way. It's not like we're not trying to rewrite history. What we're doing is like you're evolving and changing and growing as a person. And that gets reflected in, how the company might be positioned, right? Because
Right.
companies aren't companies without people. And so people are
Right.
always putting their imprint, on what you're doing.
Yeah. No, so good. So good. Now, we have a whole another topic that I want to bring up, but we're going to take a quick break before we jump into that, because you tapped onto something earlier that I want to talk about, especially in your industry of copywriting, branding, and marketing. The whole AI generation that's coming, right? Or that's here, right? I want to get into that with you and talk a little more about what that looks like here, and just how the value of copywriting is still there for the writer. So, we're going to take a quick break. We still have some good, deep conversation to get into. So, make sure you come back on the other side, and be sure to share this episode. Share it. I'm telling you, it's going to bless somebody, especially if they're a business owner. They need to hear this tonight. You hear me? So, go ahead and take this quick break, get you something to drink, share, and we'll be right back. This is Pen the Writer's Utopia.
Whether it's a snow adventure in the mountains or a train trip across the country, a tour of the Greek Isles, or sailing the seas, Elegant 3 Travel will get you there. Our executive staffing provides top-level staffing to federal and private sector companies at the most competitive price. We are experts in coordinating projects from design to development, and we teach others the business of federal contracting in collaboration with the Louisiana MBDA Business Center. Global Executive Staffing is the Department of Veteran Affairs, Center for Veterans Enterprise, certified service-disabled veteran-owned small business. At GES, we meet the needs of our clients on time and within budget, every time. To connect with us, go to www.gestaff.com.
Welcome back to Pen the Writer's Utopia. We are continuing our conversation with Miss Courtney Malengo. Why am I stuttering over your name, child? But we are continuing our awesome conversation about marketing, the business of marketing and writing and copywriting. And she has given us some good gems and some good things to think about. And one of the things that I wanted to go back and touch on was earlier you mentioned the new AI, how AI is still learning from us. And you do see a lot of people now using it in their day-to-day needs for writing, whether it's writing social media posts. Some people are using it to write content. I know as a publisher, the last few times I went in to get the books ready to go, one of the things the distributor is now asking is how much of this content was written by AI. And I'm like, wait a minute, people are literally using AI to write their books instead of using their own words. What are we doing? So
Yeah.
I know one of the places that it is being used the most is now in marketing. What does that look like for a person that is in branding and marketing right now and copywriting?
I have a lot of thoughts about it. So I think one is that I don't think anyone's going to lose their job, not yet anyway. I think that could happen in the future, but I'll tell you that I've had conversations with lots of clients, even lots of other industry professionals. And, I think the best way to use AI right now, at least as it pertains to kind of the writing side of the equation, is to use it as a brainstorming tool. I mean, so I do
Yeah.
that all the time, right? Like I might be working on something that, I have some different wording that I've kind of already put into it that I don't like, or I might say, hey, take these 5 words and, reshape that into an email headline or a subject header. And, maybe out of like the
Oh,
10 or 15 that I get, and like there's 5 in there that I might consider, but I never use them verbatim with what like it spits out at me. So, I'll use Chat GPT like as a brainstorm tool, but I always have to tweak it. And I always have to not only tweak it for like if it's my voice, right? If I'm writing for myself or something. I mean, typically I don't do that if it's just for myself, but if there's something I feel like I'm ruminating on it, maybe I just don't quite have it, like I haven't fleshed it out the way I want. It's a great way to like, it's almost like you're bouncing it off someone else, right? So I
right.
like that aspect of it. But it's frequently wrong on a factual level. And sometimes it's almost like too polished, if that makes sense. So, you're just like, I wouldn't say that way. Or this client, like if you know a brand's voice, it's like they wouldn't say it that way. Now, I think again,
Yeah.
over time, you can teach it to get better and to learn that voice more and some of the nuances of it. But the one thing AI is never going to do is it's not going to do strategy for you. All it's doing is pulling information from either what you're giving it or what's already online. So
Yeah.
it's not going to do strategy and it's not going to do a lot of emotion because it doesn't understand, those two things. Like it can pull you strategy that someone else has written or someone else has done or piecemeal different things, but it's never really going to be customized to you. And I think that's the piece, that everybody misses. So in my mind, from an ethical standpoint, like I was just reading on a public relations forum, about some of the new standards they're putting in place in Europe. And if you use AI, you have to disclose that. So, if you are using AI to like write all your social posts or like all these other things, you have to do that. I think that if you're just using AI to literally write everything for you or literally write a book with your name on it, that's not you writing.
No,
Um,
it's not.
I, as a writer, I take kind of offense to that a little bit. It's again, I think it's good to use it as an editor. It's good to use it as a brainstorming tool. But you kind of have to know. It's sort of like if you don't know who you are, it's going to lead you down every single path. Like if you don't know what your
Oh, that's
brand
so
is,
good.
or it's like, oh well, that sounds good. I'll use that. But I kind of liken it to when clients like, or again, organizations, anybody posts on social media, like just to post, like that there's no plan, there's no purpose, and there's no strategy. It's like, oh, well, this is what's trending on TikTok. Well, why are you on TikTok? Is your demographic on TikTok? If it's not, like, I don't understand why you're wasting time trying to do this latest like coordinated dance, right? Like there's a time and a
I
place for that.
love it.
In the business world that is not going to translate to sales for you in most cases. There are some exceptions to that, but that's what I'm saying. So you need to know your message, know your audience, know when and how to reach them, and then tailor the content to do that. You can't just decide like, hey, it's Veterans Day, so I'm just going to post Happy Veterans Day like every other brand. Like to me, that's like, why are you even wasting the space to do that? Unless you can show me a story of how you're honoring veterans, right? Are you honoring veterans that are on staff in your organization, or do you guys partner with a veteran organization every year, right? And you donate to them? Do you have, veterans that you're serving? Like, you need something that ties it back to your story, your goals, again, the why of your organization, rather than just let's like aimlessly wander down the social media path, right? So that's sort of how I feel about AI too, is you still need to do the work to know who you are, to have your strategy in place, to understand all that, and then use it as a tool, to help for refining things. Like I think one area it probably could be really great at, I haven't personally used it for this, but is sales emails, right? If you're doing sales all day every day and you're doing calls, like it could probably help you create a good script. Same thing with the email, but all those things still have to be in alignment with like the organizational narrative. So
Right.
it's going to require some effort on your part.
So I just want to take a moment to just breathe this moment in, Courtney, because literally you have dropped so many gems in just that little bit alone. Like, in branding and marketing, you see that I done got excited. I ended up with that big old smile on my face over it, because I'm like, girl, if you don't talk about it, like I tell people all the time, people are like, well, what's up with, like you said, TikTok, or what's up with this social media thing? And I'm like, but is your audience on there? Or are you just going on there because you saw someone else get 1 million followers? Like, how is those 1 million followers? Who cares if you have 1 million followers if it's not your target market, if it's not the people that you need to market to for your business? You're just on there getting fans that aren't going to ultimately be able to utilize your product. So I'm glad that you touched on that, right? Because it's so true, and it applies to, like
That is exactly right.
In the marketing, and then writing, like you said, even with using it to write social media posts, if it doesn't have your voice, like that's the thing that makes us unique as writers, is the fact that our writing is our expression of our voices. And in that, we're not just writers, but no writer is alike. We all have something unique that ties into our voice. We don't all sound the same. So if you're using something that's making you generic, it's stealing your voice. And then what do you really have as a writer?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I have ghostwritten for a lot of executives and CEOs. And, it's funny because I think I have a very distinct style of writing. And I think because I'm a writer, and just because I'm also a communicator and, all these things, I can tell when, something is different, right? So like if I learn your voice, I'll be able to tell if that's off, or like I can kind of hear how you might say something. So, I would try and like model and mimic myself as much as I could to whomever I was ghostwriting for. But, I had some executives that like, they didn't really have a writing style. They were just like, I don't want to do it. Can you do it for me? And then I'd say, okay, well, here's what I wrote, but I know that this is sort of like more me, right? So, give me some feedback, like give me some edits. And I would have some that would, and then, I had one that like, he would, rarely edit anything I gave him. And I was like, I know that I'm not perfect. And I know that, I'm probably going to go back and re-edit this like 3 or 4 more times, but it's like, even the littlest thing, like, would you use this word, right? There are certain words that I use that somebody else is not going to use. So, understanding those kinds of things and how people talk and their cadence and the way they talk and the types of words they use and how they convey stories or jokes, all that is germane to then like what you're trying to copy. So, AI is trying to do that in some way. And again, I don't think that's all bad. I think it's just, you have to realize sort of what it is and what it can do, but that, you're still responsible, and you're also responsible for making sure that like you're not infringing on copyrights, that you're not stealing someone else's information.
Yeah.
And that also it's correct, like factually correct. There's tons of stuff online that's not true, that's wrong. So,
Correct.
I look at it as a big minefield as opposed to like, yes, I think it's, there's great advancement in it. But I don't think it's not going to replace what I do or what any other writer does. Not right now. I think it will only enhance that. And I do think people who value that skill and sort of value the authenticity that comes with it,
Yeah.
will never fully outsource to AI, because then everybody's stuff's going to sound the same. Like, another example I would give that I think is similar, that is technology based, that's been a great advancement, is Canva. Okay. So,
Mm-hmm.
Canva has essentially like democratized graphic design for the average person. So
Yeah.
like anybody now can kind of consider themselves a graphic designer. I don't view it that way, but I do see the benefit of it. So like I use Canva, but I also use graphic designers. And I use Canva for clients who, they need a system where they can easily access their files and have other people contribute to it and make edits. But we will create a template from scratch in Canva for them. So we're not using like a pre-existing template that's already been there. But if
That's
you
so good.
look around at a lot of the templates that are there,
They
you're
all look
like,
the
I mean, I
same.
can spot them, right? I can be like, that's
Mm-hmm.
probably like a Canva design, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they are a lot of them are aesthetically pleasing. There's nothing overtly wrong with them, but they are a bit more, basic or entry level. And so if everybody that is a handyman is using this same template, if every realtor, if
Yep.
every, again, insert whatever your profession is, like you're not different. And so I think that part of the visual design and expression of your brand also has to be unique. And because
Yeah.
it's part of how, people recall who you are and what you do. It's that they see those colors or those images, it's like Nike, right? That swoosh is iconic. You can't imagine then just letting everyone else use a swoosh, right? Nike would
Right.
not let you, they would sue you. So, I think if you look at Canva through that lens, there's wonderful things about it for what it is, but Canva is not a graphic designer. Canva to me is like, and this is going like kind of way back in my career, but to the days of what we used to call like people who were doing like desktop publishing, so you
Right.
might open a publisher, right, on your computer, and you might design a flyer. You're not a graphic designer doing that. You're just like a desktop publisher. That's what we would sort of call them, or you're just doing the layout of a flyer. Like a true designer is never going to use like a template someone else created. They're going to do all that stuff from scratch. So I
You're
think,
so right.
yeah,
And it's gonna look different, and
different.
there's layers to it. So no, you're absolutely right. You're so right. And even with the AI, you're right, there are layers, and goes back to that unique voice. Like if you don't have the layers of the uniqueness of your voice in it, then you are copying and pasting. And you're absolutely right. There are some, and I know because I've used a couple of them, just being honest, just for a quick post, and you look and you can tell because everyone's just going in using the template, changing the information, maybe changing the color, you know what I mean, but the
Right.
basics of the design is still what the design was. And you're seeing how, oh, that's a Canva design, oh, they did that here, and oh
Yeah.
yeah, no, you're right, you're
I mean,
right.
like I said, it's not all bad. I mean, I like Canva quite a bit, and I actually think, again, I think there's a lot of benefits to it, especially for how I look at it is like for someone that doesn't have the resources and the money for a graphic designer, like it's a great place to start. But I don't think you
Right.
should live there forever, And again, because there's not a truly unique look and feel to the things that you're putting together. Again, it might aesthetically be appealing, but it's not really uniquely branded to you, even just within the color changes like you're talking about. So again, I think there's a time and a place for all of them. I mean, I think for some of the social media posts, sure, there's certain ones that you could easily like update and alter, again, design wise to get something you need.
Right.
So it's not like it's all bad. It's just, but I think we have to know and recognize like I live in those worlds every day. I talk to graphic designers who, I have a couple who like they opine a bit if I'm like, hey, I want you to design this for me in Canva, because it's like it's cringe. It's sort of, you know what it is? It's like back in the day when I worked in-house. And so like every place I worked, almost every place, I ran kind of like an in-house agency, internally. And in order to have branded templates internally, we would need to make branded Word documents, like ones that you couldn't jack up. So like if I wanted to have a letterhead template that was editable, I had to do that in Word, but I had to lock down the design. So I only had like one designer at the time that would be willing to even do that, because it's like most graphic designers, they're like, no, we don't even touch Word. Like we don't do that. And it's like, I completely understand why they didn't want to do that. But it's like internally, again, so I get that most of your work is like, again, it's external facing. You might be doing ads or brochures or direct mail or digital ad campaigns, like whatever that is. But there are internal purposes for marketing too. And you want things to have a cohesive and consistent look and feel. And you need to meet people where they're at. I cannot expect someone internally to use Adobe Photoshop or, Adobe InDesign. Like that is unrealistic for any average person. So
Right.
what can we use? And that is the part of Canva that I think, like, so to bridge those two things, that's the part of Canva I think is great, right? Like it has.
And I was going to say, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier. So in your infancy, right? So for anyone that's using, Canva or something that's templated, it's okay. In your infancy and in getting started, maybe you don't have the budget for marketing and branding specialist, right? So you're creating these things on your own, and there is a time when you'll use it. But then as you grow and mature, again, talking about the child analogy, as you grow and mature, as your business grows and matures, then you graduate on to having the publicists, the marketing and branding specialists, and you go on to build those components of your business as your budget allows. But it's nothing wrong when you have to do it in the beginning.
That's right.
But it's like Courtney said, whether you're writing or whether you're designing, guess what? You still want your voice to be unique, because that is the thing, right, that makes your business your business. That is the thing that makes you stand out. A lot of times people ask, well, what makes your business different? And my answer is me.
Yeah.
I make my business different. Yeah, because
that's such a great question, because I ask that question all the time.
Yeah, I'm the thing that makes my business unique, because there is something that I am gifted with that that only I can do in my voice, right? So there are other people, there are other writers out here, other novelists that are out here, other authors that are out here, and guess what? We all have a different voice. We all have a different point of view, and it is our experiences and our point of view that brings something different to the table from working with someone else or someone else's writing. Even me as a publisher, my voice is different. The way I coach is different. What I bring to the table comes different from me based on what I'm gifted to do than another writing coach or publisher that's out there. I make my business different. They get frustrated at me sometimes, like, no, well, what else do you offer? No, I offer, it's me. It's working with me and my unique gifting that makes my business different. Like, I don't know how else to explain that to you.
Yeah,
that's all I got.
Well, I think that's a good question, because it's a question I ask people all the time, like what actually makes you different? And the answer I'm often given is around a product or a service. And usually it is neither of those things, because, like, again, let's just look at, realtors, right? I'm going to pick on realtors for a second. Realtors are a dime a dozen. They all do the same thing. I mean, there's minor nuances, like someone might they might say to me, oh, well, I focus on like first time home buyers. Okay.
Right.
But like what you do is essentially the same though, right? You're still buying and selling, or just selling, or, whatever, right? But like all these things on paper are very similar. A realtor's probably going to watch this and get upset that I'm saying this, but That's kind of the truth. It's the same thing with attorneys, right? Now, attorneys have like broader areas or buckets that they might specialize in, but they're also focused on the law. It's just like, what aspect of the law are they focusing on?
Right.
So I don't think those are the things that actually make you different. I think what makes you different is really when you understand, again, like what's sort of your purpose, what's your why, what's the soul of your company, your North Star, and how it's the how and the why, right? Because it informs then how you create that product, how you deliver that service. I have a lot of clients that are in the senior living sector. Again, on paper, a retirement community looks exactly the same. Again, they all want to say we're totally different, but yet they market with the same stock photos. They use the same language. They have the same services. You're not actually different in that case. But what does make you different are the people that work for you. And so that culture, that story, what you're telling and how you're sharing that, that is what is going to set you apart. And I think when organizations can understand that when they thread that narrative, so like when they actually understand their story, they know who they are, why they're doing what they're doing, and then they thread that narrative throughout every aspect of what they're doing internally and externally, there really is no competition, because that creates a connected, cohesive message in the marketplace and from a culture and recruitment and retention standpoint. And it makes it a better place that people want to work at.
Yep.
I mean, employees and your customers are going to be the first to smell out like when you are not doing what you said you're going to do, when your word and your deed are misaligned, when there's a gap between those two things, people are always going to be quick to point that out. They will know. And so the more you can unify all of that and recognize that, like, hey, the retirement community or the realtor or the attorney down the street is not really my competition, because we have something special. Again, it's not necessarily the service that we offer, but it's how we do that. And if you
Yeah.
start to think about a brand as a culmination of every single touch point and interaction someone has with you or your organization, I think you'll start to think about it differently, because it's no longer about what you say your brand is. It's ultimately what all those people are experiencing. That becomes your brand. So the more you can weave that consistent message and create a compelling and cohesive experience for someone, something that is so memorable that they want to rave about it. I call it storied hospitality, like that you've created this wonderful experience for someone that is so amazing that they are just going to go on to talk about that forever because of what you've done. And they will be brand loyal to you because of that.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm saying to every writer that is currently watching this episode, the same applies to you and your area of writing. You have something specific that makes your voice unique. Your purpose and your why for writing makes you unique. And the thing that you have to do, like on the high end, we're talking about branding and marketing for business, but you as a writer, writing is your business. So you need to take these same principles and nuggets of wisdom that Courtney is sharing and apply that to the way that you write, the stories that you tell, and um, apply it. Apply it to your unique gifting and your unique purpose and why. We're we're all writers, but I know that my stories are not for everyone. They're for a specific set of people, and I'm okay with that. Now, don't get me wrong. In the beginning, I thought I was going to publish the world, and I thought that everybody in the world was going to be buying my books. But as I began to mature in my gift of writing and the way that I wrote and the stories that I tell, I understand that it's not for everybody, and that's okay. That just means that there is someone else out here who is gifted to reach those people.
That's right.
The others that may need the same information I'm giving, but they have the voice that's going to resonate and reach that other side of the population, right? And it goes on and on and on from there. Like, we all are gifted, but I may reach and have a voice for a certain group of people, be it women or teens going through certain experiences, you know what I mean? And the next person may have it for the next group of people, right? Or they may have the voice for men. They may be saying the same thing about healing, but it may be for men or young men, right? We all have to identify with what our purpose and our why is, and who we are to give these stories to. So just as in business, the business of writing is your business. And so you should think of your writing in those terms, the same way Courtney just broke it down for someone who owns a corporation or a small business. You need to apply those same things to your writing to find out who your audience is. Your audience is unique to your voice. And if you don't know your voice, then you won't know who your audience is. But I can tell you, it's not for every single person in the whole wide world. I can tell you that. I can tell you that we each have a group, an audience that we're assigned to, and you need to know who they are so that you can effectively market and reach them, right?
I mean, the best brands are really capable of attracting and repelling, because that's it, getting down to like the real semantics of it. That's what you want, just like your point is. I mean, I'm not for everyone, you're not for everyone. We can't be all things to all people. And so, the best of brands understand that, embrace that, understand again who they're trying to target, who they're trying to reach. So one of the things for me about Spark and Buzz is like, I don't want to work with clients that just are content with status quo, that just, they want to keep doing the same thing that they've been doing. Like, I will drive you bonkers if that's, if that's what you want. And then you hire me, we're both going to be frustrated. Okay. And so I don't want that. I don't want you to be frustrated with me. I don't want to be frustrated with you. But, that's a big thing that will either attract or repel people. It's like, there's just certain things around that. And so every brand has it, but that's what you want. That's exactly what you want. So if it's repelling some folks that you don't want, you might think initially like, oh no, especially if you're early on in business, like I need to take everybody on. I need to do all these things. You can't be all things to all people. So it's okay. It's okay if you're repelling some of them. They're not meant to work with you anyway. You want to attract the kind of clients, the kind of customers, that are going to be most aligned with you and your business.
Yep. So good. Well, we're going to take a quick break. All right. And then when we come back, we're going to find out how we can get in contact with Courtney, as well as tap into a little bit of the other things that she has going on. Because believe me, she has some amazing events that take place each year. And we want to make sure you guys can get connected with her. So we'll be right back on the other side of this break. This is Penn, the Writer's Utopia.
Whether it's a snow adventure in the mountains or a train trip across the country, a tour of the Greek Isles, or sailing the seas, Elegant 3 Travel will get you there. Global Executive Staffing provides top-level staffing to federal and private sector companies at the most competitive price. We are experts in coordinating projects from design to development, and we teach others the business of federal contracting in collaboration with the Louisiana MBDA Business Center. Global Executive Staffing is the Department of Veteran Affairs, Center for Veterans Enterprise, certified service-disabled veteran-owned small business. At GES, we meet the needs of our clients on time and within budget, every time. To connect with us, go to www.gestaff.com.
Welcome back to Pen the Writer's Utopia. We are continuing our conversation with Courtney Malengo, who is the founder of Spark and Buzz. In my opinion, she is a marketing and branding genius. Yeah, I said it. You'll see why I said it in a little bit. But she's a marketing and branding genius. And I'll just say why I say that, Courtney, because Courtney's over there laughing like, what is T doing? I say that because I know the driving force behind you and your business. So Spark and Buzz is a marketplace business, but the founder and the woman that is running it is ran ultimately by God.
Yeah.
And so she is a Holy Spirit led faith believer in God who uses her relationship with God to run her business, even though her business is in the marketplace and the forefront doesn't say that it's a faith-based business. The owner is faith-based and rooted in God and uses her relationship to guide her decisions. Let's talk about what that looks like, because previously in the season, we've talked to people who are out front, like their business is faith-based. It is driven by their faith and belief in God, right? But you, on the other hand, you have a business that is a marketplace business, but it doesn't necessarily say, hey, I serve God, the great I am, and I'm a lover of Jesus Christ. It doesn't say that, but you, the owner at heart, that is who you are, and that is how you pray and get your directions for your business. What does that look like for someone like you in the marketplace?
I mean, I love talking about the intersection of faith and business. It's certainly an area that I am passionate about, and I'm sure, as T-Lynn and I have talked before, we'll kind of probably dive into some of that more as we discuss. But I think everybody is different, right, and how they're called. And so, my business serves people of, all faiths and backgrounds. I certainly have worked with, many faith-based organizations in the past, but that's only one component of the work that I do. I think that when you let God lead and you're trying to be obedient to the calling he's given you and what you're supposed to do, it means that I try and honor people in a way that shows God's love to them, that I have ethical practices in my business, that I do everything with the lens of knowing like God's looking at that. And so I never want to have something that even that looks bad, or I don't know how to say it. I guess I always want that to represent well. And I think
Yeah.
if people don't know off the bat, I prefer to take the approach of like, if you get to know me, you will know that, I love the Lord and that's an important foundation in my life. I rather have relationships with people where I don't necessarily have to overtly tell them that I'm a Christian, because I want them to see
Because you
something
live it.
different.
Yeah. You live it.
Right. Like
Right.
to me, it's not about talking about it, though I will talk about it. It's about the walk. Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? And, there's always opportunities. So I think I like talking about faith and business because I don't think that those things have to be inherently separate. I think that they can go together. And you'll have some folks, like you mentioned, other people you've interviewed, who they have a faith-based organization or a faith-based business, and it is overtly marketed and branded that way.
Mhm.
Spark and Buzz Communications is not, but in the background of it, like you mentioned, it's more about how, I feel like I need to approach different situations, or frankly, even I'll tell you, there's been like countless times in my career where like something bad was going to happen and I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I needed to do something to prepare. Like I just felt like I'll share one story I had with one of my clients. They had a murder suicide occur at their retirement community. And in the months leading up to that, I had attended like a PRSA conference, and I remember hearing a session about the CEO of the BP, the former BP CEO, like when they had the big oil disaster, and kind of how horribly that had been handled and how horribly the CEO did. And I remember leaving that session thinking, oh my gosh, like I have to write a crisis communications plan for this client, and it was just like, it was super heavy on me. Like I needed to do it. So I wrote this plan, I gave it to the CEO, and we would sort of like, I don't remember how much time went by. It was probably like a month or 2 months, and I was like, hey, have you had a chance to read my plan yet? He's like, no, it's still sitting on my desk. Like, I'll get to it. And then one morning, I was actually traveling. I was up in Connecticut. I got a phone call very early that morning that there had been a shooting at the retirement community. And he called me and he's like, hey, that crisis plan you wrote? I was like, yeah. Did you read it? And he's like, nope, but you're going to activate it right now. And I'm like, wait, why am I doing that? What's happening? So then of course, a flurry of activity occurred, but all of the stuff that was around that, I mean, essentially went away in 24 hours. And the reason that happened is because we were prepared, or more directly, I was prepared. I didn't know.
Because God has showed you and given you that insight
That's
that,
right.
oh, you're showing me this in this session because you need me to do this. And then he told you
Yeah.
exactly who it was for. Out of all of your clients, he pinpointed for you who you needed to
Yep.
write that for.
I mean, I
Wow.
just felt like I knew, like something, and I hate saying it like this because it's not normally the feeling I would get, but I just had this feeling like something bad was coming and I didn't know what it was. But I mean, I remember telling him that though too. I was like, there's no mistake in why I wrote that plan. Like I wrote that plan for like this very thing,
Right.
and I kind of explained to him like sort of what happened. So, to some people, maybe they'll just call it, oh, well, maybe, you had a premonition or, a gut instinct about something. I like to call my gut instinct the Holy Spirit. It's God. He's using that to like get me to make sure that I do something I need to do.
Yeah.
And so that's how I see it. It's like I think that faith and business can go together and that can help you tremendously, not only in how you navigate relationships with people, but
Yeah.
in the business dealings and partnerships you get into. And then even the potential, unknown of things like this that could happen.
Yeah. And you know what else I love about the way that God uses you in the marketplace right now? And when you were saying that you're not marketing per se to faith-based businesses, like you do some that may, not be a faith-based business, but at the end of the day, what came to mind for me was, like you said, do everything in excellence as if unto God. That's the scripture, right? And so in you doing that, I love it. You're like, you don't want to just have to say, oh, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. Oh, I'm a follower of God. No, you're like, no, I want to demonstrate it so that people are looking at me saying, what's different? Something's different about her.
Yeah.
Like you do it in your actions. And I believe that even in the marketplace, when you're operating, it doesn't have to be said. And then when they're asking what makes you different, there are so many people who have been led to Christ from encountering someone just like you in the marketplace. They didn't get saved at a church. They
Yeah.
met someone on their job, and the way that that person lived made them say, I want to know more about your God. And they got saved from that relationship and demonstration. And so I love that that
Yeah.
is the way that God uses you in the marketplace, and that you still operate in that excellence, whether it's a faith-based company or not. It's
Yeah.
still your way of ministry. I like that.
Yeah, I think that, there's so many rules, right? About like what you're supposed to say or not say at work. I've not always been like the best with that. I would say, let me put it to you like this. I have always, even when I work for other people, I've always been willing to have some tough conversations, right? I've never been ashamed of my faith. Um, and I also think, realistically, there are people that will be at odds with what you believe. But that's
Hmm.
also why I think I have preferred to not lead with that always. As in, I do want you to see that even if we have like diametrically opposed opinions and positions on something, that I'm not going to treat you differently. I might not
Right.
agree with you and I might not like it, but I'm still going to respect you as a person. And I'm going to still want the best for you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's kind of the difference, you know.
Yeah.
Now, again, a lot of people can say they're a Christian and they can also be some of the most like horrible people you meet. So I think I've, you know, been acutely aware of that. Like I've met some terrible Christians. I understand why people don't want to go to church, you know. So
Right.
I think thinking about it like that, it's like I just try to live every day as honest and authentically as I can so that who I am in the workplace, who I am at home, who I am if you see me out and about in the community, it's the same person, that there's nothing like duplicitous within that. And like that is really important to me. And that's what I think ultimately, you know, when you're working with someone and you're spending so much time with them, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they see all these things. They see the
Yep.
inconsistency in your life. They see when you make mistakes. They see how
Yep.
you handle ethical conundrums. Like people are always watching what you're doing.
What you're
Doesn't mean
doing.
that you
Yep.
don't make mistakes, but what you do with that mistake is kind of what means everything. You know, are you the
Yep.
person that's willing to say, I'm sorry, like I messed that up. I shouldn't have done that, you know, or I
Yep.
apologize that I hurt your feelings when I said that. Like I'm definitely not perfect, but you know, if I can strive to communicate that and like own my problems and be willing to say, hey, look, I missed the mark on that. I
Yep.
think that that does go a long way for people.
That's so good. That is so good and so true. So good. So good. Now, you still have, even though Spark and Buzz is not faith based, you do have a faith based arm of work that you do. Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
Yeah, so when I started Spark and Buzz, which was in 2019, I had like a normal year, you know, before the pandemic hit, and I had been joining like different groups, right? Going to different networking things, chambers. I even joined a women's entrepreneur group, and I felt like I just didn't 100% fit in at any of these places. It's like I was trying all these things and I wasn't really loving it. And I was like, you know, I'd really like something where it was like faith-led female founders. So I
Mm-hmm.
started, you know, Googling and looking, and I couldn't find anything, at least not kind of in my backyard. And
Right.
so I was like, huh, there has to be, I'm like thinking in my head, like, you know, there has to be like a market for this. How come this doesn't, you know, exist? And in like very typical me fashion, I was just like, oh, well, it doesn't exist. Like, I'm just going to start it, you know, like that's sort of always my like philosophy. Sometimes gets me into trouble, but I knew. So what was funny is at the time, this was in March of 2020, that I started this group called the Spark Collective, and it started with one of my clients who was a Christian, and then my best friend who had just taken over her family business. So you know, she became kind of a business owner. So I was like, hey, I know two people, right, that fit this criteria. They could totally join the Spark Collective. And so that's what we did. There were three of us that, you know, started at the very early outset. And we were doing Zoom, you know, gatherings kind of during the early part of the pandemic and then morphed to being in person. But really, the whole drive behind it was selfishly like I wanted a place where I could talk about my faith, my family, and my business with other women, but also not feel any type of competition or drama. Like I
Oh, I
really
love
wanted to
that.
change the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
women supporting women. Because I can tell you, and T-Lyn, I could sit here for probably another hour and opine about this and get on my soapbox. But you know, I get so sick and tired of women talking about supporting each other when they're the
Yep.
first ones to be
To
stabbing you in
tear
the
each
back in
other
the
down.
workplace,
Yep.
right?
You're the
And
first one to tear
all
each other
throughout my
down.
career, all throughout my career, any problem, it was always like some woman that had a problem with me, and I'm like your biggest cheerleader. I'm like, I'm just over here trying to help you, but
Mm-hmm.
because in whatever
Mm-hmm.
adjective you have some issue, you know. And so it's like people didn't talk about this, but I'm like, you know, if we get out of our own way, we literally would rule the world because we're not focused on like other women being our competition. So I
Right.
thought, I want to change that. I want that experience to be different for other women that are starting a business. I want them to feel supported. I want to be supported, and I want to have access to on-demand counsel, because I don't have coworkers anymore. So, so that is really the genesis of the Spark Collective. There's usually, now we're up to about 7 to 10 women. We meet every other month here in the DMV. It is a membership-based, community. You can learn more at thesparkcollective.com. But it's all targeted around, like, how do we just help one another grow in our businesses, grow in our faith? And there are all types of businesses represented. So I look at it as, it doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, or if you're overtly faith-based, or if you're not. Business is still business. And, there are things that we can learn from one another in each of our seasons of life. And I think that's part of what makes it special. It's hard when you go out on your own. And so, another sort of outgrowth of that was for women who, like, may never experience the Spark Collective. Maybe they don't live super close. And I've been focused on it being hyper local, because I think, with the pandemic making everything accessible online, that's wonderful. But frankly,
Right.
it's a
But you're
lot
missing that
harder.
in-person
Right.
connection. Yeah.
It's hard to forge relationships exclusively online. It just
Right.
Zoom in and of itself requires more work to communicate, because it's like you're looking at the camera, right? You're looking at the other person. All these things are sort of happening, and it requires your mental capacity and your mental load to work a bit harder. I just wanted, people to be able to get together without a strict agenda, but to just sit down, with a cup of coffee, with a glass of wine, with whatever. And, like, let's just talk. Let's talk about business, like, what's going on.
Yeah.
So for women that might not be able to be hyper local, or, have that kind of an ongoing group, I thought it'd be really cool if we did, like, a day retreat. And so, I started this thing called the Spark Summit, and we've done it for 3 years in a row. It's a day retreat for faith-led female founders. It happens every May. And it's really just a time where we are focused on talking about this intersection of faith and business. Like, what does that look like? And we always have different speakers and panelists. But then there's also a lot of time for you to focus on your business, your relationship with God, and time, frankly, to kind of just decompress. Women run busy schedules, busy lives. They're responsible for a lot of people. We frequently neglect ourselves. And so I saw this summit as just an opportunity for women to, like, take a breath, treat yourself a little bit, but also get some really inspiring and insightful information from other women who've done it, who've been before you, or who know exactly, what you're struggling with or where you're at. And again, there's not this, we're not trying to compete with one another. Like, we actually want to support each other, and see each other do well. Like, that God's storehouse is more than enough for everyone. I don't need to, like, fight, over the manna with you.
Right. There's enough manna to go around if you just, again, focus in on what you need to be doing. There's enough. There's more than enough. That is so good. So if you want to connect with Courtney and the Spark Collective, go on over to thesparkcollective.com. You'll get more information. Now, is the summit information on the Spark Collective too, or is that over at Spark and Buzz?
It's at both, but it's only really advertised during, like, the months preceding the event. So, like, in the springtime, you usually see something like in February, kind of starting to announce the date. So you can find that at Spark and Buzz. You can also find it always on my Instagram at Spark and Buzz. And the Spark Collective has its own Instagram too, at the Spark Collective. So I try and advertise that in those places as well. If you go to Spark and Buzz and you sign up for my mailing list, you'll get a notification about it in one of my newsletters, because I always kind of cross promote that. So there's not a lot of information currently up about it, but when we get closer, after the new year, we'll start promoting for next spring.
Awesome sauce. Well, Courtney, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you this past hour. You have dropped so many good gems, from marketing and branding to even talking about following that gut feeling, AKA, as we call it, the Holy Spirit. moving and how it prepares us when we stop and listen, and even the value of carrying your faith, being the same person on your own, in your private life and in your business life, how people are watching you at all times and still being that example of God for the person who may not know him. And so I have so enjoyed our conversation. And I always give an opportunity for my guests to give that one more nugget of wisdom. So I want to ask you before we go, is there one last nugget of wisdom that you would like to share with our viewers before we go?
That's a good question. I feel like we have had a lot of good nuggets. I don't know if I'll be able to top everything I've already said, but I think what I would say is this, especially if it's someone who is contemplating starting a business or is just like early on, is, to not be afraid to try. I think we have to expect and anticipate failure. And I think sometimes, as we're trying to listen to what God is leading us and calling us to do, it does require us to stumble and fall. And that part of that is just a refinement process. But I don't think that we have to fear that, because God always uses that to grow us and to change us. And so I'm kind of the perpetual like cheerleader in the sense that, I think you can do anything you put your mind to. And if God's called you to do it, he's going to supply the resources for it. So, I'm always like, go do it, because
Right.
I will say it I wasn't sure how I was going to start my business. I mean, I always wanted to work for myself, but I was working for a company that I liked very much. I'd been with them for 10 years. And after I was pregnant with my son, I realized like this is just not compatible with kind of the lifestyle I want to have. And I hated not really seeing him. And I could not figure out, like me in my own mind, right? I was like, I don't have time to do a side hustle to build up to a full-time business. Like, how can I just walk away? How can I walk away from a really good paying job? I have great benefits. I'm making, at the time, I was the breadwinner in the house. I remember talking to my husband about this. I thought it was like crazy at first. Like how can I do those things? And in the physical world, that seemed totally impossible. But what I realized was like God had to make me uncomfortable to get me to move, to take that kind of
Yeah.
step out. And so if you feel like you're being called to step out into something, then like I would encourage you to do it, because even though it was hard and I didn't know what that was going to look like, man, I couldn't even tell you the full story now, but it only happened because like God orchestrated all of it. And so, he has always taken care of me and everyone, right? Like it's just a
Mm-hmm.
matter of our expectation and what that looks like. So I'm always going to be the person that says like go out and do it, because I believe that you can and that you don't want to have regret in life. Most people regret the things that they never did, the what ifs, right? So it's
Yeah.
like if you have that call in your heart, and again, I can't tell you what to do. That's like you have to discern that, only you will know, because you got to discern that between you and the Lord. But if you're feeling called to do something and to launch out on your own, do it with gusto. Don't do it in fear, because if you're called, and like I said, all those things, they will align somehow. It just might not look
The
exactly
way
like how
you
you
thought
thought
it
it would.
would. Yeah. So good. So good. Because like you said, where God guides, he provides. And I love that nugget. So if God is tugging at your heart and you know that he's calling you to do something, um man, Courtney, I relate. When he's calling you off of your job and you're like, I don't see how we're going to make it when I make this move. Like, are you kidding me? But if he tells you to do it, once you take that leap, you'll be surprised at the parachute that opens for you. And sometimes it does not look the way you think it is. And I'm glad you said that, because you may be thinking that he's going to give you this big, luxurious parachute and it turns out to be a hang glider. But guess
That's
what?
right.
He still catches you. He still catches you and gives you what you
Yes.
need to get where you're going. Like, seriously. Sometimes it's
That's
not
right.
the way, you think it's going to look. And that's okay. You have to be open, because his ways are greater than our ways. His thoughts are greater than our thoughts. But nevertheless, if he sent you to it, he will absolutely provide for you along the journey, because sometimes he's not providing it the way that you think it should look, because he's trying to grow and mature you in
That's
some
right.
areas along the way. Well, that
Yes.
was such a good nugget, such a good nugget. Listen, I hope you've enjoyed my time with Courtney as much as I have. Again, go on over to sparkandbuzz.com to learn more about her marketing and branding business and the services that she offers. I'm telling you, when you have the Holy Ghost leading you, it makes you a genius in what you do. I'm telling you, because you can't get no better than that. And if you're interested in a community of women that simply want to uplift and help you move forward, not someone that's going to beat you down, tear you down, go on over to the Spark Collective to learn more about what they do and that community that Courtney is building, the Holy Spirit led community that Courtney is building over at thesparkcollective.com. Again, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, Courtney. I truly appreciate you. I hope you guys have appreciated her. Be sure to share this episode with someone else. I'm telling you, someone else needs this information. I don't know them. Courtney doesn't know them, but guess who does? You do. And they won't get it unless you share it. All right. Sharing is caring. Thank you guys for joining us this evening. I truly appreciate you. Go and do something great this week. Take the leap. Take the
That's
leap.
right.
If God is tugging at your heart, be obedient. Take the leap. I promise he will provide. All right. Have a great week, you guys. Love you.
Thank
And
you.
good night.